Once upon a time, beneath the glimmering arch of Saturn's rings, there lay the Titan diplomatic hub, a structure of intricate spires and shimmering metal, built upon the largest moon of that gas giant, shining with the combined ingenuity of a dozen starfaring species. It was here that alliances were forged, treaties signed, and sometimes fates sealed. Commander Ryan Carter, a tall, lean officer with calm gray eyes and carefully parted hair, walked through the echoing halls. At his side, the scuff of his polished boots against the obsidian floor whispered his determination. The walls themselves seemed alive, humming with the presence of delegates from worlds beyond Earth, each bustling with urgent duties. Tension hung thick in the air, for the delegates had gathered to decide the fate of an entire galaxy poised on the brink of conflict. Humanity's place in these negotiations was both precarious and crucial. Humanity was new in the cosmic tapestry, having ventured into deep space only a few short decades ago. Yet, they had proven to be adaptable and, when necessary, courageous to a fault. Commander Carter had been specifically selected for this mission by the heads of Earth's fledgling Space Federation. His duty was to secure an alliance with the Xelari, an ancient race famed for their unmatched combat prowess and strictly disciplined social code. Without their support, the humans would be left vulnerable to the roiling conflict that threatened the entire region of space, known as the Outer Rim. General Hayes awaited Carter in a wide, circular council chamber at the heart of the hub. The room was dominated by a large, translucent table that displayed a holographic map of the sector, showing drifting star clusters and spinning planetary bodies. Hayes, a grizzled veteran of Earth's earlier interplanetary disputes, stood straight-backed and stern, wearing an air of authority that seemed almost palpable. The Xelari, with their towering forms and formidable presence, had already demanded a demonstration of trust. They required the ritual known as the bonding. Few details were clear, but the rumor in the corridors was that 3 envoys from other species had attempted it in the past, and all 3 had died. No one entirely understood how or why, except that it tested both strength and spirit in ways that transcended mere physical combat. When Carter stepped forward, Hayes regarded him with narrowed eyes, crossing his arms over his broad chest. "So, you're volunteering," the general said, voice low and grave. "You know full well what happened to the last delegates who tried to complete the bonding." Carter drew a breath and nodded. "We need the Xelari's alliance. They will not trust us otherwise." A hint of respect flickered in Hayes's eyes. "Are you certain you can handle this?" "We won't know until we try, sir. But if we don't attempt it, Earth is finished. The Xelari can tip the balance in our favor against the looming threat of the Drax Dominion. Without them, we're doomed to fight alone." Hayes sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Then, he pulled up a holoscreen that displayed the mission parameters, glancing over them one more time before handing the device to Carter. The screen showed staggering images of the Xelari homeworld, harsh, volcanic landscapes dotted with monolithic temples that reached to the sky. "The truth is," Hayes admitted, "we're not sure if any human has a chance. But if you believe you do, I won't stop you. It's your life." Carter accepted the device and nodded. With a salute, he left the chamber, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. He had only a few hours to prepare before the Xelari's arrival. Those hours passed in a blur of final checkups, a thorough physical exam, mental conditioning routines, and consultations with cultural experts who had spent years studying what little they knew about the Xelari. It was a crash course, even though Carter had spent the better part of the last year researching Xelari customs. He learned about their concept of honor, about the communal bonds that bound their entire species in an unbreakable chain, and about how they revered strength, both of character and body, above all else. Just as Carter finished donning his ceremonial uniform, an outfit of dark, polished material with subtle patterns that shimmered in the low light, an alarm sounded through the Titan diplomatic hub. Red lights flared overhead, accompanied by a calm but urgent voice. "Attention! The Xelari envoy has arrived. Delegates, please report to docking Bay 12. This was it, Carter thought, and he headed for the bay with resolute strides, ignoring the tension that gnawed at his stomach. The corridors pulsed with anxious energy as other delegates made way for him to pass, each giving him a wary nod or a half-whispered word of encouragement. Docking Bay 12 was massive, designed to accommodate various alien vessels. Carter arrived just in time to witness the Xelari ship, a sleek, obsidian craft adorned with glowing symbols that pulsed with an otherworldly rhythm, settle upon the deck. It hissed softly as it released pressure, and a ramp extended. From the craft, a lone figure emerged. Nearly 8 feet tall, the alien wore ornate armor of black and shimmering turquoise. A faint haze of heat or energy radiated from her form, distorting the air around her. Every step she took was measured, deliberate. The Xelari warrior's face, though humanoid, possessed slight ridges along the brow and jaw, accentuating the strength of her features. Her eyes glowed a faint gold. She paused at the base of the ramp, surveying the bay. Then, her gaze fell upon Carter, who approached with controlled humility. He bowed slightly, an earth gesture of respect, hoping it was acceptable. She inclined her head in return, though her gaze remained ice-cold, like a distant star. "I am Kaela, daughter of High Warlord Karen," she announced, her voice resonating across the space. "I am here to conduct the bonding with the one they call Commander Ryan Carter." Carter inclined his head more deeply. "I am honored, Kaela. Welcome to Titan and the diplomatic hub. I will do my utmost to prove myself worthy of your trust." Kaela regarded him for a moment, her alien eyes searching. Finally, she let out a low, reverberating sound that might have been a hum of acknowledgement. "We shall see, human. Your kind is untested, but we Xelari do not fear the unknown." With that, a small contingent of armed Xelari appeared behind her, bearing the regalia of their house. They formed a line, each standing at rigid attention, while Kaela strode forward. Carter could feel their collective gaze upon him, weighing him, measuring him. General Hayes arrived soon after. He greeted Kaela with a respectful nod. "On behalf of Earth, I extend our welcome. We have prepared quarters for you." Kayla's eyes flicked over to the general, briefly acknowledging him. "I require nothing beyond what is needed for the bonding. We begin at once." Hayes gestured for her to follow. "Very well," he said. "This way." And so began the uneasy partnership between Earth and the Xelari, united by necessity. Little did anyone know, the trials ahead would not only challenge Carter's physical stamina, but also probe the deepest layers of his soul. In the quiet corridor that led away from the docking bay, Carter walked alongside Kaela. She moved smoothly for someone her size, and Carter couldn't help but steal quick glances at her imposing figure. The mission demanded diplomacy and courage, but it also required understanding on a level no one before had achieved with the Xelari. She spoke without warning, her voice calm yet firm. "Your ways are strange to me, Commander. You greet with shallow nods. You measure your words. My people speak plainly, and the bonding is not a matter of politeness. It is a forging of trust with real danger." "I understand," Carter replied softly. "If I appear guarded, it's because I've been warned of the dangers." The last to attempt the bonding did not survive. Kayla's lips drew tight in what might have been a grimace or a sign of sadness. "We do not relish the loss of life, but our traditions are older than any race can comprehend. Those who died were found unworthy, not by us, but by the ritual itself." Carter nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. He was terrified, but he refused to show it. "Then I will give everything I have, Kaela. For my people, yes, but also because I respect your traditions." She turned her gaze upon him once more, weighing his words. "Very well, Ryan Carter of Earth," she said, using his full name as though testing its shape upon her tongue. "We shall proceed." Just then, they arrived at a specialized suite that had been prepared for the bonding. It was a large, circular chamber with a glowing platform at the center. Ancient markings, carefully copied from Xelari texts, adorned the walls in flowing patterns. The air crackled with a subtle energy, as though the very room was alive with anticipation. Before Carter could even ask about the procedure, Kaela circled him, her footsteps echoing against the polished floor. She closed her eyes, then placed a gauntlet hand on the center of his chest. A tingling sensation spread through Carter's body, prompting him to inhale sharply. "It begins," Kaela intoned. "We stand upon the threshold of an unbreakable bond, formed through shared adversity, trust, and the spark of spiritual unity. Will you submit yourself willingly?" Carter met her glowing gaze. "I will," he murmured, fighting to keep his voice steady. A faint tremor vibrated through the chamber, and Carter's vision dimmed at the edges. He could sense a distant roar in his ears, like a tidal wave surging from the depths of an alien ocean. His breathing grew labored, his pulse pounding as if he'd sprinted across a battlefield. Then, with shocking abruptness, an image flashed before his eyes. A vast desert under a red sky, where monolithic spires loomed on the horizon. He was alone in that vision, unarmed, while towering shapes moved behind the spires, their shadows stretching across the sands. A wave of panic nearly overwhelmed him, until he heard Kaela's voice cutting through the haze, commanding him to remain steadfast. This lasted only moments, or so he thought, before the chamber snapped back into focus. Carter stumbled, catching himself on a railing. Kaela stood tall, observing him with an impassive expression. "You have seen the first vision," she stated. "A reflection of Xelari memory, drifting on the surface of your consciousness. You did not collapse, as others did." Carter drew a shaky breath, trying to steady the pounding in his skull. "Is that all?" he asked, attempting a wry grin despite his trembling limbs. "Because it feels like I just fought a war in my mind." For the first time, Kaela let a small smile curve her lips. "That was merely the beginning. But you have surprised me, human. Perhaps there is promise in you." He opened his mouth to reply, but the moment was cut short by a sudden surge of energy that pulsed through the hub. The lights flickered ominously, and an alarm began its wailing cry. Over the station's comm system, a frantic voice announced, "Unidentified vessels have entered Titan's orbit. The defense grid is compromised. All hands, prepare for potential assault." Kaela's expression hardened, and Carter felt a wave of adrenaline spike through his veins. Earth's precarious negotiations had only just begun, and already it seemed someone, or something, sought to shatter any hope of peace. In that swirling chaos of alarm klaxons and flickering lights, Carter and Kaela exchanged a single, determined glance. They shared no words, but they both understood. They would fight side by side. The first test had already begun. With purposeful strides, they sprinted from the chamber, hearts pounding in unison, forging a bond of necessity, and perhaps, in time, of genuine trust. The corridors were awash in crimson emergency lights, painting the pristine walls with an ominous glow. Commander Carter clenched his jaw, ignoring the dull ache in his chest from the initial phase of the bonding. Kaela, her giant steps easily keeping pace, moved like a predator stalking its prey, scanning every corridor intersection for potential threats. The Xelari contingent, those few warriors who had accompanied Kaela, mobilized with silent efficiency. Armed with weapons that seemed to hum with coiled power, they spread out to secure key junctions of the diplomatic hub, coordinating with the human security teams who looked on with both gratitude and unease. Never before had Xelari warriors and human soldiers fought side by side. As Carter and Kaela neared the main tactical center, the station's intercom system blared again. Hostile forces identified as Drax Dominion ships. They're deploying boarding craft. All personnel, brace for impact. Repeat, Drax Dominion vessels inbound. A grim look passed between Kaela and Carter. The Drax Dominion, implacable conquerors from the fringes of known space, were notorious for their ruthlessness. It was said that once they set their sights on a target, they would stop at nothing to subjugate it, enslaving or destroying all who stood in their path. Carter swallowed hard, pushing open the doors to the tactical center. Inside, General Hayes and a cadre of Earth's top officers were busy coordinating the station's defenses. Holographic displays glowed with lines of code and strategic maps. The flickering images showed at least 3 Dominion cruisers circling Titan, unleashing waves of smaller craft that hammered at the diplomatic hub's weakened shields. "We've lost contact with the remote defense satellites," one officer reported, voice taut with urgency. "The Dominion must have jammed them. We only have the hub's internal weapons left." Hayes snapped a fierce look at Carter. "We could use some help out there, Commander. Glad you're still in one piece." Then he turned to Kaela, not flinching at her imposing stature. "And you must be Kaela. I hope we can count on the Xelari's strength." Her eyes flashed. "We are warriors. We do not stand idle while others wage war, especially on a site of negotiation." Carter nodded. "General, Kaela's forces and ours can work together to repel the boarding parties. If we hold them off for long enough, Maybe the other allied fleets stationed in the sector can come to our aid. Hayes glanced at the tactical readouts, then back at the formidable alien warrior. They'll be sending infiltration squads through docking clamps, or by breaching the outer hull. We need to split up. Carter, you and Kaela head for the eastern concourse. That's where one of their boarding craft is touching down. With that, Carter and Kaela rushed off. As they traversed the hub's labyrinthine corridors, the echoes of distant gunfire and the hiss of energy weapons grew louder. Overhead, the station rumbled with the impact of external blasts. The subtle hum of life support systems warbled, hinting at partial damage. At last, they reached the eastern concourse, a wide, high-ceilinged passageway lined with observation windows that offered a breathtaking view of Saturn's majesty. Normally, delegates strolled here to marvel at the rings, but now the space was a war zone. A Dominion boarding pod had latched onto the outer hull, cutting through with plasma torches. Sparks rained from the molten metal, illuminating the concourse in flickering bursts. A squad of heavily armored Dominion soldiers poured in, each resembling a sinister bipedal reptile with spined crests and razor-sharp talons. They screeched orders at one another in a guttural language, brandishing rifles that glowed with lethal energy. Human security teams had taken defensive positions behind overturned tables and makeshift barricades. They exchanged sporadic fire with the intruders, but were slowly being overwhelmed. Carter could see that morale was beginning to crack under the relentless Dominion assault. Kaela wasted no time. Letting out a ferocious battle cry, she charged forward, weaving through blasts of enemy fire with uncanny grace. Her armor absorbed glancing shots, and she retaliated with a crackling Xelari spear that she wielded like an extension of her own body. With each thrust and sweep, she tore through Dominion ranks, sending shrieks of pain and alarm echoing throughout the concourse. Carter wasn't idle. He dove behind a fallen column, returning fire with his pulse pistol. Despite the fear gnawing at him, he found a steady focus. This was why he had joined Earth's space forces, to protect humanity and its allies. Now, more than ever, he was determined to prove himself worthy of standing shoulder to shoulder with a warrior like Kaela. Bullets and plasma bolts crisscrossed the space, leaving scorched trails along the walls. Kaela's Xelari warriors arrived in a tight formation behind her, swiftly reinforcing the outnumbered human security teams. A synergy formed, forging an unspoken sense of solidarity. The humans provided covering fire, while the Xelari took advantage of their superior size and strength to dominate in close quarters. In the chaos, Carter spotted an officer of the Dominion directing its troops from behind a portable energy shield. If he could take that leader out, the rest might fall back. Checking his surroundings, Carter noticed a series of overhead pipes that ran the length of the concourse. If he could get above the fight, perhaps he could outflank the commanding officer. Timing his dash with a lull in the gunfire, Carter scrambled along the edge of the wall, pressed himself into a narrow maintenance hatch, and climbed a short ladder. The clang of boots on rungs echoed in his ears as he emerged onto a narrow walkway that overlooked the concourse. From up here, the smell of scorched metal and singed flesh was overwhelming. Peering down, Carter saw the officer barking orders, shield shimmering with a protective barrier. Summoning his courage, Carter lined up his pistol. At that moment, a Dominion soldier spotted him and fired, nearly toppling him off the walkway. Carter steadied himself just in time, returning fire and neutralizing the soldier. Then, with no hesitation, he aimed at the officer, squeezed the trigger, and sent a pulse round crackling through the shield. The energy barrier distorted for a split second, enough for Carter's shot to slip through, striking the officer square in the chest. A startled hiss escaped its throat. The Dominion officer staggered, dropping the device that powered the shield. Immediately, the crackling barrier fizzled out. Below, Kaela and her warriors saw the opening. With a collective roar, they surged forward. Free from the officer's commands and lacking cohesive leadership, the Dominion troops scrambled to retreat back through the boarding pod. The Xelari and human forces pressed the advantage, driving the invaders out of the concourse. It was a decisive victory for that section of the station, but the fight was far from over. Even as the last of the Dominion soldiers disappeared back into their pod, explosions rumbled elsewhere throughout the hub. Carter climbed down to rejoin Kaela, heart pounding. A wave of exhaustion threatened to drag him under, but he refused to yield. Kaela's armor was scorched in several places, yet she stood tall, chest heaving from exertion. "That was well done," she said, her voice resonating in the sudden lull of the corridor. Not many would have attempted that shot from above. Carter drew a ragged breath, offering a tense smile. "We do what we must to protect our own, Kaela." Her golden eyes flicked to the damage around them. "Your bravery is commendable. But remember, this battle is but the opening strike. The Dominion will not relent so easily." Their comms crackled, and Hayes' voice came through, laced with urgency. "Commander, Kaela, the Dominion is launching a secondary offensive near the lower docking sections. Civilians and wounded are trapped there. We need immediate support." Kaela's gaze hardened. "Then let us not linger." Together, they led a combined force of Xelari warriors and human soldiers deeper into the station. In the winding corridors, they encountered more pockets of resistance, Dominion squads, savage and unyielding. Despite the dangers, Carter could sense his bond with Kaela strengthening, not just through the intangible spiritual link from the ritual, but also through shared combat. With each obstacle, their cooperation became more fluid, their trust in one another more profound. Yet the bonding ritual itself remained incomplete. It hung over Carter like a half-formed promise, a whispered oath that demanded fulfillment. The ephemeral vision of the Xelari desert still lingered at the corners of his mind, beckoning him towards something deeper. He wondered if, when the time came, he would be ready to fully embrace that alien communion. Rounding a corner, they reached the lower docking sections, an area lined with large transport bays used for trade and commerce. Now, it was a battlefield. Fires blazed, and thick black smoke curled along the ceiling. Civilians in tattered robes and station uniforms huddled in corners, seeking any cover they could find. A handful of security personnel held a defensive line near the main entrance, but the Dominion was rapidly advancing. Without hesitation, Kaela leaped into the fray, her spear whirling in a deadly arc. Carter followed close behind, rallying the terrified civilians to move behind the cover of cargo crates. Chaos swallowed the scene. Blasts scorched the air. Shrieks of fear mingled with the guttural roars of Dominion soldiers. Time seemed to blur. Carter found himself helping a wounded woman, whose leg was caught under debris. With a surge of desperation, he heaved the twisted metal aside, ignoring the pain that flared in his shoulders. Then, a Dominion warrior loomed behind him, jaws parted in a vicious hiss. Before Carter could react, a bright flash lit the corner of his vision, and the alien crumpled to the floor with a smoking hole in its chest. He turned to see Kaela, arm extended from delivering a precise strike of energy. She nodded to him, an unspoken reassurance passing between them. With the immediate danger neutralized, Carter dragged the injured woman to a makeshift triage area, manned by station medics. Through the swirling smoke and confusion, he noticed more Dominion bodies littering the deck than human. The tide was turning. Then came a thunderous groan from the docking bay doors. With a metallic shriek, they began to buckle. Carter realized the Dominion might be preparing some larger weapon or perhaps a monstrous assault unit. The realization hammered at him. They were already stretched thin, their forces scattered across the station. Could they withstand another wave? Kaela pulled Carter aside, out of earshot of the civilians. "We must finalize the bonding," she said, her voice tinged with urgency. "Our synergy in battle shows the ritual's momentum, yet it remains incomplete. Without its full power, I cannot summon the ancestral guardians of my people." Carter blinked. "Ancestral guardians? You mean some sort of reinforcement?" Kaela nodded. "In a sense, yes. If we complete the bonding, my people's ancient spirits will recognize our alliance and lend their strength through me. It is a power not easily explained in your terms, but you have tasted a fraction of it during the initial vision." He recalled the desert under the red sky, the monolithic spires. It had felt real, alive with primal energy. "What must we do?" he asked, bracing himself. Kaela glanced around. "There is no time to prepare a sacred chamber, so we must proceed here. We shall stand in the place of greatest need and let the forging of our bond serve as the final key." She raised her spear, motioning for Carter to place his hand upon its gleaming shaft. He complied, though a tremor of trepidation coursed through him. Kaela then gripped the spear as well, and together, they closed their eyes. Even in the midst of chaos, an otherworldly silence descended around them, as though they occupied a separate pocket of reality. A surge of energy pulsed through the spear, coursing into Carter's fingertips and along his spine. His surroundings faded, replaced once again by that alien desert. This time, however, Kaela was there beside him, her tall figure outlined against the blood-red sky. The monolithic spires rose around them, humming with an ancient power. "Do not fear," Kaela's voice echoed in his mind. "Face whatever appears with courage, and let the bond forge itself in truth." Then, the sand around them stirred. Massive forms emerged, half hidden by swirling dust. Carter's heart thundered. He sensed intelligence, power, and a stern, scrutinizing presence. He knew, instinctively, that these were the ancestral guardians. One by one, they stepped forward, colossal beasts shaped vaguely like the Xelari but glowing with ethereal light. Their eyes bored into Carter's very soul, weighing his worth. He felt judgments pass over him, his memories laid bare, his motivations dissected. Would he stand for honor, or cower in fear? Trembling, Carter refused to lower his gaze. In his mind, he projected everything he was, every ounce of determination, every drop of compassion he had for his people and for the Xelari, whose proud traditions he had come to respect. The largest of the spectral figures bowed its head, a radiant acceptance emanating from it. In a rush of light, they all vanished. Carter felt a searing brand of energy, not painful, but overwhelming, as though a star was igniting in his chest. He gasped, and the desert dissolved, replaced by the acrid smoke and metallic corridors of the diplomatic hub. Kaela's eyes snapped open, golden irises flaring with a new intensity. She let out a breath that sounded almost like a sigh of relief. "It is done," she whispered. Carter staggered back, feeling simultaneously drained and invigorated. The bonding was complete. In that very moment, the battered docking bay doors tore open with a thunderous crash, revealing a towering Dominion war beast, a cybernetic monstrosity with serrated limbs and a plasma cannon mounted on its back. Its roar reverberated through the station, sending waves of terror among the surviving defenders. But Kaela stepped forward, spear crackling with renewed power. Carter, standing at her side, felt a resonance within himself, a portion of that ancestral strength now dwelled in him, too. For a fleeting second, they exchanged a glance. United, they charged. The Dominion war beast fired its plasma cannon, blasting a chunk of the floor into molten slag. Kaela leaped aside, landing gracefully, and lunged, spear sparking. Carter circled around the beast, drawing its attention. He fired his pulse pistol in calculated bursts, aiming for exposed circuitry along its flank. A savage dance ensued. The beast lashed out with mechanical limbs, scraping the walls and howling with alien rage. Kaela deflected a lethal blow with her spear, the force nearly driving her to one knee. Carter took the opening to unleash a volley of shots, exposing more of the creature's internal components. Then Kaela channeled the bond's energy, the spear glowing bright enough to sear the eyes. With a shout that resonated through the corridor, she drove the spear into the war beast's core. Sparks erupted in a dazzling display, and the monstrosity collapsed, twitching in its final throes. Cheers erupted from the battered human defenders. The few remaining Dominion soldiers in the docking bay took one look at the unstoppable duo and fled, slithering back through the breached door to escape. The fight, at least in this section, was over. Exhausted, Carter leaned against a scorched wall, breathing hard. Kaela lowered her spear, which still gleamed faintly. She turned to Carter, and for a moment, the two simply stared at each other, sharing a mutual understanding that transcended language. "That was something else," Carter said at last. The throbbing in his veins felt both alien and exhilarating. Kaela nodded, a hint of respect softening her features. "We are bonded now, not only in ritual, but in battle. The Xelari will not abandon you, Ryan Carter. You have proven yourself worthy." He gave a shaky laugh, relief washing over him. "Let's hope the rest of the station is faring as well as we are." A static-laced transmission sounded in both of their comms. Hayes's voice crackled. "All forces, the Dominion is retreating from Titan's orbit. They're pulling back. I repeat, the Dominion is retreating. Stand down from full alert, but remain on guard." The tension that had gripped the station gradually began to ease. While the defenders had not emerged unscathed, there were casualties, wounded, and heavy damage to many sectors. They had withstood a Dominion assault that, only hours earlier, seemed unstoppable. In the aftermath, medical teams poured into the lower docking areas, tending to the injured. Engineers hurried to patch depressurized sections of the station. Through it all, Carter and Kaela found themselves regarded by both humans and Xelari as heroes. Whispers circulated of a newly forged alliance, sealed by an ancient ritual that none had expected a human to survive. Later, amidst the bustle of repairs and triage, General Hayes found them in a makeshift command post. His expression was weary but triumphant. They've withdrawn for now, but we have intel suggesting the Dominion will regroup. That was just a probing assault, most likely. He turned to Kaela. You have our gratitude. Your people's help was indispensable. Kaela inclined her head. The Xelari do not seek gratitude, only alliances forged in mutual respect. We shall stand by Earth. That is now our oath. Carter exchanged a look with Hayes, then turned to Kaela. Thank you. With your support, we may yet protect this sector from the Dominion. Her golden eyes softened. It is I who must thank you, Ryan Carter. You have helped me fulfill the bonding in a way that transcends our usual expectations. In your courage, I see hope for unity in this galaxy. A silence fell over them, charged with the weight of a great turning point. In that stillness, Carter realized that everything he had endured, all the danger and uncertainty, had led to this singular moment of cooperation and mutual understanding. The bond he shared with Kaela was no mere ceremony. It was a living testament to the possibility of harmony among distant worlds. The battered diplomatic hub still glowed beneath Saturn's rings. As the station's systems began to stabilize, an atmosphere of resolute optimism spread among the survivors. For the first time, delegates from various species observed the partnership of humans and Xelari with cautious admiration. Perhaps, they thought, if these two races could find a common ground, even forging a bond rumored to be lethal, then maybe the entire galaxy could unite against the Dominion threat. That night, when the station's artificial lights dimmed to simulate a planetary evening cycle, Carter found himself in a small observation lounge. Through the wide windows, Saturn's rings appeared like a silent, shimmering tapestry. He was joined by Kaela, who stood quietly, arms folded across her chest. For a while, neither spoke. They simply gazed at the cosmic vista, letting the enormity of the stars and the swirling rings sink into their minds. The hum of the hub's engines provided a distant lullaby, a reminder of the fragile metal shell that separated them from the vacuum of space. Eventually, Kaela spoke, her voice low. This is beautiful, in a strange way. Your ring giant is not so different from some worlds in the Xelari starfields. Yet it is unique. Carter nodded, eyes on the view. I used to think Earth was the only place worth seeing. Then I came here, saw Saturn's rings up close, and realized how vast and wondrous the universe can be. And now, with all I've learned about the Xelari, I know I've barely scratched the surface. Kaela glanced sideways at him. Our knowledge of your people was limited. Many of us believed humans were frail, easily broken. But the bonding has revealed otherwise. We see not just frailty, but also an indomitable spirit. A smile tugged at Carter's lips. We've had to fight for survival on Earth for millennia. I suppose that does something to a species. Kaela reached out, resting a hand gently on Carter's shoulder. The gesture, while simple, carried a gravity born from their bond. He placed his own hand over hers, feeling the warmth of her alien skin beneath the metal gauntlet. There is more to come, she said, her voice tinged with both gratitude and caution. The Dominion threat grows, and other species in the galaxy are still undecided. But the path we walk, Xelari and human, may yet inspire unity. Carter took a moment before replying. I know, and we'll face it together. In that quiet vow, sealed by the shimmering starlight, the two forged a partnership that promised hope in the face of cosmic darkness. As the next cycle dawned, the Titan diplomatic hub would ring with new negotiations. Word of Carter and Kaela's successful bonding spread like wildfire, igniting curiosity and careful admiration among the many races assembled there. Some doubted, some questioned, but others listened, hearts stirred by the possibility that two very different species had formed a bond strong enough to withstand the crucible of war. And so, in a galaxy teetering on the brink of despair, a new light emerged, a beacon of cooperation that refused to be snuffed out by fear. But the story was far from concluded. For even as the station's battered hull was repaired and alliances took shape, the Dominion plotted its next move. Deep in the shadows of the cosmos, unseen eyes watched the evolving unity between Earth and the Xelari, their intentions as cold and silent as the void itself. The future hung in the balance, uncertain yet filled with promise. And at the center of it all, standing tall beneath the swirling rings of Saturn, were Commander Ryan Carter and Kaela of the Xelari, two souls bound by fate, sealed in an unbreakable vow that transcended worlds, forging a bond that would one day alter the destiny of all sentient life. Part of Carter wished for a moment of respite, to simply breathe and reflect on all that had transpired. But the galaxy's troubles offered no such luxury. Over the next several days, representatives of various species gathered in the hub's main council hall to deliberate the repercussions of the Dominion strike. Though the station bore the scars of battle, the spirit of its inhabitants soared. Kaela, standing at Carter's side, became a formidable presence at these gatherings. Her mere appearance commanded respect, her voice carrying the conviction of a warrior whose life was pledged to more than mere words. The Xelari had come not only to observe, but also to enact a grander vision of interstellar unity. Kaela's father, High Warlord Karen, transmitted an official message affirming that if the humans, and by extension, their allies, stood for honor and freedom, the Xelari would join the alliance against the Dominion's aggression. As Carter and Kaela moved between meetings, Carter noticed that the tension among delegates eased whenever they caught sight of the tall alien warrior and her bonded human companion. Whispers spread of a mystical ritual that had defied all odds, bridging two species in mind and spirit. Skeptics still scoffed, of course, but even they could not deny that there was something remarkable unfolding on Titan. "It seems we've become symbols," Carter observed one evening, as they left a tense negotiating session with the Krogans, another warrior race that prided itself on tradition, though their brutality often overshadowed their sense of honor. Kaela nodded thoughtfully. "Symbols can unite, but they can also be targets. Our bond challenges old prejudices. Some will cling to fear rather than embrace hope." They turned down a hallway lined with tall windows that revealed Saturn's rings in all their luminous splendor. Even after witnessing them countless times, the sight stole Carter's breath. Yet as much as he relished the view, he could not ignore the lingering sense of an impending storm. The Dominion had retreated, but surely they had not given up. In fact, intelligence reports indicated that Dominion fleets were massing near the star system known as Aetherian's Gate, a strategic choke point that could allow them to strike deep into Allied territory. With each passing day, rumors of an imminent invasion grew louder. If the Dominion launched another offensive, and on a larger scale, countless worlds would be threatened. In response, the newly formed alliance began to mobilize. The Titan diplomatic hub buzzed with activity, supply ships ferrying essential materials, engineering teams reinforcing structural defenses, and multiple species coordinating fleets in orbit around Titan. Earth contributed its fledgling armada, smaller yet determined, while the Xelari dispatched advanced warships reminiscent of the sleek vessel Kaela had arrived in. Other allied species followed suit, albeit with caution. Every night, Carter fell into a fitful sleep, visions of red deserts and towering spires haunting his dreams. Now that he and Kaela were bonded, he sensed her presence in those dreamscapes, an echo of her consciousness that lent him reassurance. And he suspected she saw glimpses of his memories, too. Though they rarely spoke of it aloud, their bond flourished in the silent spaces between words. At last, a critical council session was convened, a final gathering before the Alliance would mobilize to confront the Dominion near Aetherian's Gate. Delegates from over a dozen species assembled in the Grand Hall, the air humming with anxiety. In the center stood Carter and Kaela, flanked by General Hayes, ambassadors from Earth, and the handful of Xelari warriors who served as Kaela's retinue. Hollow screens projected a tactical map of Aetherian's Gate, a cluster of volatile stars encircled by cosmic debris, forming a natural barrier. Whoever controlled the gate could decide the fate of the entire region. The Dominion's presence there spelled doom unless opposed by a united front. As the assembly commenced, each delegation took turns declaring their stance. Some pledged warships and resources, others offered logistical support. A few, still uncertain, hesitated to commit fully, fearful of provoking the Dominion's wrath. Tensions mounted, voices were raised. The possibility of fragmentation loomed, threatening to unravel the nascent alliance. Then, Kaela stepped forward, her imposing figure casting a long shadow across the floor. She struck the butt of her spear against the ground, the reverberation silencing the hall. "Hear me, peoples of this galaxy," she began, her tone firm yet resounding with measured passion. "The Dominion will show no mercy to those who remain idle. They have tested our resolve once and were driven back. But next time, they will come in greater force. Do not be deceived by dreams of isolation. The darkness at Aetherian's Gate grows. Stand with us, or fall alone." A hush fell, broken only by the soft hum of the station's ventilation. Many delegates looked to Carter, the human who had dared complete a lethal bonding ritual. He felt their silent question. Could he, a mere mortal, truly stand beside this towering champion? Swallowing his nerves, Carter cleared his throat. I'm no prophet. I'm just a soldier who believes in doing what's right. We humans cannot face the Dominion alone, nor can the Xelari. But together, we achieve the impossible. That's the heart of what an alliance means. If we stand united at Aetherion's gate, we might not only protect our worlds but pave the way for a lasting peace, one that's stronger because it's built on shared courage. The sincerity in his voice, amplified by the intangible bond he shared with Kaela, seemed to resonate through the room. Delegates began nodding, some exchanging determined glances. Even those who had hesitated appeared swayed. When the vote was called, nearly all pledged their support. A wave of relief and triumph swept the chamber. As Carter looked up at Kaela, he saw the flicker of a proud smile touch her lips. The course was set. A grand allied fleet would converge upon Aetherion's gate to drive the Dominion back before they could muster a crippling offensive. That very evening, the Titan diplomatic hub witnessed an exodus of ships, each representing a thread in the tapestry of the new alliance. The Earth contingent, though modest, carried with it the hopes of billions. The Xelari warships, sleek and menacing, escorted the fleet, forming a formidable vanguard. Other species contributed exotic vessels, some shaped by centuries of distinct technological evolution. Together, they formed a coalition that had never before been seen in this quadrant of the galaxy. Carter found himself aboard the ESS Endeavor, the flagship of Earth's fleet. General Hayes commanded from the bridge, while Carter was assigned a specialized role as liaison to Kaela and the Xelari. Aboard her own flagship, the Valiant Spire, Kaela prepared her warriors for the coming confrontation. Though they were on separate ships, their bond remained, a tether of spirit bridging the void between them. The journey to Aetherion's gate was uneventful, a tense calm before the storm. Along the way, Carter and Kaela communicated via secure channels, discussing strategy and morale. Their exchanges were brief, both had duties to perform, but each conversation recharged Carter's resolve. At last, the Allied fleet emerged from warp space near Aetherion's gate. The star cluster loomed in the distance, cosmic storms crackling across swirling nebulae. Dominion vessels hung like dark silhouettes against the backdrop, and there were far more of them than anticipated. A lump formed in Carter's throat as he studied the sensor readings. The Dominion presence was massive, including multiple capital ships and carriers brimming with fighter craft. Even with their combined might, the Alliance faced a daunting challenge. Yet, retreat was not an option. The future of countless worlds hung in the balance. Minutes stretched into hours as the fleets maneuvered into formation. Tensions soared to a breaking point. When the Dominion finally opened fire, the gates of chaos burst wide. Space lit up with the furious exchange of energy beams, missile volleys, and crackling plasma arcs. Allied fighters streaked between capital ships, engaging Dominion interceptors in frantic dogfights. Distress calls and bursts of static-laced chatter poured through comm channels, forming an orchestrated cacophony of war. On the ESS Endeavor's bridge, Carter assisted Hayes in coordinating with the Xelari forces. He relayed real-time battlefield data to Kaela, who led the vanguard in daring strikes against Dominion flanks. Despite the numerical disadvantage, the Alliance maintained discipline and unity, each species contributing its unique strengths. Amidst the swirling chaos, Carter's bond with Kaela flared to life, and he glimpsed her presence as though standing beside her on the bridge of the Valiant Spire. Through their link, he felt her determination mingled with a solemn readiness to lay down her life if necessary. He sent back a surge of confidence, wordlessly conveying that they stood together in this final test. Bit by bit, the Alliance gained ground. Dominion frigates succumbed to well-coordinated barrages. Allied boarding parties disabled critical systems aboard enemy cruisers. The Xelari warships, in particular, proved devastating, channeling the same ancestral energies that fueled Kaela's spear. Electric arcs lashed out from their hulls, crippling Dominion vessels in bursts of brilliant light. But the Dominion flagship, a behemoth named the Dread Ascendant, remained. It hovered at the edge of the battlefield, unleashing salvos that pounded Allied ships relentlessly. Protective fields glimmered around its massive hull. If the Alliance could not neutralize the Dread Ascendant, the Dominion would maintain a crippling advantage. Carter, Hayes, and the other commanders devised a bold plan. Under covering fire, the Xelari flagship and the Endeavor would lead a concentrated assault, spearheading a formation that punched directly toward the Dominion flagship. While the Dominion concentrated on repelling that thrust, smaller Allied vessels would flank the enemy, targeting the Dread Ascendant's shield generators. It was a plan fraught with risk, demanding perfect timing and unwavering resolve. Yet they had come too far to falter. The Allied forces rallied, battered hulls gleaming with the light of distant stars. Engines roared, and the formation surged forward like a tidal wave determined to break against the Dominion flagship. Enemy fire intensified, turning space into a raging inferno. Allied ships exploded one by one, valiant crews lost. But the push continued. The valiant Spire, with Kaela at its helm, carved a path through the Dominion lines, while the Endeavor followed close behind, fending off interceptors with point defense weaponry. Half the distance closed. The Dominion flagship's cannons belched torrents of plasma. The valiant Spire's shield flared, dangerously close to failure. Carter gripped the Endeavor's railing, heart pounding. Then, in a flash of sudden brilliance, Allied corvettes swept in from the flanks, striking the shield generators. The protective field around the dread ascendant flickered, revealing a vulnerable flank. Now was their chance. Hayes shouted, "All batteries, concentrate fire on that unshielded section. Let's end this." Bolts of energy and missiles converged, hammering the Dominion flagship. A series of chain reactions burst across the hull, snapping it in half with a violent explosion that rippled through space. Shockwaves rocked the Allied ships, but when the light faded, the dread ascendant was gone, a twisted hulk drifting in a cloud of debris. Pandemonium erupted in the Dominion ranks. Without their flagship's command, they began to break formation, some fleeing into warp, others surrendering or powering down. The Allied fleet, though battered and mourning its casualties, had achieved the unthinkable: victory at Aetherian's gate. Cheers rang through the corridors of the ESS Endeavor. Across every Allied vessel, relief and jubilation mingled with somber reflection for the lives lost. Carter slumped in his station, exhaustion flooding his limbs. Beside him, Hayes wore a grim smile, eyes shining with gratitude. A burst of communication lit up Carter's console, Kaela's voice. "Ryan Carter, the tide is turned. The Dominion has fallen back. We are victorious." He could almost see her proud stance. Smiling through tears he hadn't realized were there, Carter replied, "We did it together. You, me, and everyone else who believed." When the Allied fleet regrouped, warships bearing the insignia of Earth and the Xelari took up a central position. A hush fell across the channels as Kaela's image appeared in a sector-wide transmission, standing tall on the bridge of the valiant Spire. "To all who fought," she began, her voice resonating with measured solemnity, "this day shall forever stand as a testament to unity. The Xelari honor our bond with humanity and all who joined us here. In the memory of those who have fallen, we vow to safeguard the peace we have fought so hard to win." Applause and respectful silence came in reply from every corner of the fleet. For that moment, across the infinite darkness of space, hope burned brightly as a star. And so it came to pass that the Dominion's swift expansion was halted, its fleets scattered by the unexpected might of a unified alliance. Though the war was not over, the victory at Aetherian's gate signaled a turning point. Word spread quickly among neutral systems, drawing them into the burgeoning coalition. From that day onward, humans and Xelari were no longer strangers in the cosmos. They were allies, partners, and through the bond shared by Ryan Carter and Kaela, something akin to family. In the weeks that followed, as repairs were made and negotiations continued, Carter found a quiet moment on Titan's surface. The diplomatic hub orbited overhead, a shining symbol of what cooperation could achieve. Kaela stood beside him, gazing at the distant horizon where the sun glinted off Saturn's rings. They had come a long way from that first wary meeting in the docking bay. The bond between them was a tangible presence, a tapestry of shared memories, mutual triumphs, and the intangible flame of trust. "Do you ever wish things had turned out differently?" Carter asked, remembering the initial fear and the risk of the bonding. She considered this, then shook her head. "We Xelari believe fate weaves its patterns for a reason. Perhaps we were meant to find this path together, forging a bond none thought possible. And in doing so, we revealed a future where unity can stand against tyranny." Carter nodded, feeling a swell of emotion. "I like to think so, too." A gentle wind stirred the dust at their feet. Above, Titan's pale sky arched, and in the distance, The glimmer of Saturn's rings reminded them of the vast expanse that still waited to be explored. There would be more battles, more challenges, but they would not face them alone. Hand resting lightly on Kaela's arm, Carter allowed a contented breath to fill his lungs. For the first time in what felt like ages, peace enveloped him. A hush of renewal settled over the air, the calm after the storm. And in that silence, a warmth sparked between them, an unspoken promise that, come what may, they would face the future side by side, bound by respect, honor, and a friendship that had blossomed into something far greater. As the last rays of the distant sun washed over the rugged Titan terrain, a sense of joyful possibility filled their hearts. Yes, the galaxy was vast, often cruel, and fraught with peril, but now, it was also filled with hope. In the face of darkness, the bond between one human and one Xelari warrior had ignited a torch that lit the way for countless others. With that enduring promise, their story carried on, a living testament that, in a universe where fear and aggression threatened to tear civilizations apart, courage, unity, and the will to connect could conquer even the most insurmountable odds. And so, their final words lingered in the gentle twilight of Titan, sealing a future that, at long last, held the promise of a happily ever after, for Earth, for the Xelari, and for all who dared to dream of peace beyond the stars.